So the last thing we had was this idea is talif is a garment that requires tzitzis. Is that an obligation on the person, or is that an obligation on the garment? A garment that you're not going to wear, but it has four corners. Does that require tzitzis or not? So that was the last we had. So we're like right in the middle of that. I don't know, 13, 15 lines down. So Amar Le Mi Savris Chovis Gabru Chovis Talasu. So Zil Ramil. Okay, that's where we ended up. So now Lema Misayele. Let's bring a proof to this. Chasidim Harishonim. So the people in Borough Park, no, the earlier pious people, Kevin Sha'argu Bashalosh Hayumatilan Batachelas. So we had this earlier that when they would sew their garment and they got within 3 finger breadths of the end, so they would right away put on techelas. So right now the assumption is even before they're even wearing it or even considering wearing it, so they put on tzitzis right away because it's an obligation on the garment. Says the Gemara, no, shiny chasidim de machmiri anavshai. It wasn't that they were putting it on because they held that it's an obligation on the garment. Really, it could be it's an obligation on the person, but it's just they were so pious and excited for the mitzvah that at their first opportunity, they went and they put the threads on. Now, this is all this idea that a garment is obligated and not a person is obligated comes in direct contrast with an angel who pliga de malacha, the malach. So the malacha eshkel Rav Katina, a malach found Rav Katina. I'm sure this happens to a number of us. The malacha eshkel Rav Katina, the michse sadina. So Rav Katina was covered in sadina. Now, I think we're going to end up saying that this is really a linen garment, and a linen garment is he didn't have tzitzis on it. Now, I think it's going to be because the we'll see later, but the edges were rounded off. They weren't square. They were rounded off, and he didn't have tzitzis. So Amar le Katina. So he said, "Listen, Katina. Amar le Katina. He said, Sadina bekaita, v'sala v'sivsa. So tzitzis shal techeles mate elaha. He's saying you're wearing in the summer this kind of linen garment which has no corners, and you don't put tzitzis on. And then in the winter time, you wear these like circular, I don't know what they're called, sarvala, that are circular, and they also don't have corners to put tzitzis on. So basically, your whole year, your winter and your summer and your winter, you're wearing garments that don't have 4 corners, and therefore you're never wearing tzitzis. So what's going to be with you? So he asks him back, Amar le anshisu say, do you really get punished for not fulfilling this mitzvah? It's not that I'm putting on a garment and not putting tzitzis on it, a garment that has 4 corners. I'm not wearing a garment that's obligated in tzitzis. So do you get punished for such a thing? So this part's brought down in halacha. Amar le bizman de'ika rischa anshaninan. Yeah, at a time where there's, so to speak, anger in the world and there's more of more judgment and more punishment, so then we look around and we see who's trying to avoid the mitzvah. And so that's what they say nowadays, that even though if we are wearing garments like our shirts that don't have 4 corners, but you still should wear tzitzis. You should get a 4-corner garment like we all have and put tzitzis on it, because at a time of Ika Ritzcha, when it's a time of, so to speak, anger in the world, so then we're looking around and we're going to see who's not wearing tzitzis. So, well, not we're looking around, Hashem's looking around. So, yeah, that's right. So Amar le, yeah. So now, what's the proof that the malach holds that the tzitzis is an obligation on the person, as opposed to earlier that the tzitzis was obligation on the garment? So, if you're going to tell me that really it's on the person to go fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis, then we understand. And go get yourself a garment and go fill the mitzvah of tzitzis. However, but yeah, yeah, you'll be liable at a time of risk, a time of anger, because you're not somebody who's wearing tzitzis. There's an obligation on you to go get your tzitzis and put it on. If it's an obligation on the garment, well, if you don't have a garment, that's liable, so why should you be punished? That's an interesting thing, because this same person doesn't have a garment that's obligated in tzitzis. And yet the Gemara still says that if it's an obligation on the person, he should go figure it out and put tzitzis on. But yet, if it's an obligation on the actual garment, then if you don't have a garment that has four corners, so then you're not obligated at all. It's an interesting split. So you could have thought that if everything in your closet, nothing in your closet has four corners, so then whether it's an obligation on the person or an obligation on the garment, either way, you're good to go. But it sounds like from the Gemara that no, that if it's an obligation on the person, you should go figure it out. Go and get yourself that garment and fulfill your mitzvah. If it's obligation itself, so then it's nothing to do with you. It depends. If the garment has four corners, put this on. If not, not. So now,
if it's an obligation on the garment, then it would be like everything or not, all or nothing. Like either you don't have to put on anything, or you have to put on every garment, even if you're not like really planning on wearing them or whatever.
No, if it's an obligation on the garment, so it just depends on your garments. If your garments have four corners, put it on. If all your garments have three corners, or they're all circular, and they're not obligated in tzitzis, yet if it's an obligation on the person, it sounds like from the Gemara, even if you don't have any garments at home that have four corners,
right,
or they're circled off corners, you should still go and go figure it out. And that's the Gemara. That's the Gemara's about to ask right now.
Yeah.
Elamai. So now the Gemara's going to ask. I'm saying before that it made that assumption. Now we're going to ask on that assumption. Says the Gemara, Elamai chovas gavrahu. You want to prove from here that because of the time of anger we get judged for not wearing tzitzis, and you want to prove from there that it's an obligation on the person? Elamai chovas gavrahu. Says Gemara, so that's kimikse talis the bas chiyuva, but kimikse talis the la bas chiyuva he michayve rachmana. I don't understand. If you want to tell me I have four corners and I'm not putting on tzitzis, okay, I understand. That's going to be a problem. But if I don't have any garments that have four corners, like most of our wardrobe, right, doesn't have four corners like we're obligated tzitzis. So what's wrong? Even at a time of anger, what's the problem? What do you want from me? I didn't buy a garment. The Macy's sale didn't sell tzitzis garments, They're just circular things with three corners. So what was the malach? What was the proof over here? Ella Haki Kamarle. Here's the malach was telling him, you're doing shtick. You're doing tricks. You're trying to get out of the mitzvah. You shouldn't try to avoid the mitzvah. How come all your garments only have three corners? How come they all have circle corners? I see you're doing tricks to get out of the mitzvah. That's not good, which is a very interesting thing. That means that even though you're not obligated to do something, like everyone wants to know, is it black or white? Does it say it or does it not say it? So you see here, even though you're not technically obligated, but it's on the person to go and fulfill the mitzvah, and not to get out of mitzvahs. I remember at one point there's a whole discussion about avoiding a situation. So let's say you see somebody coming that you have to stand up for. So you walk out of the room. So you shouldn't be obligated to stand up for them. Because how do you view that? I'm not obligated. When you walk by, I wasn't there. Those kinds of things to avoid the mitzvah. So
phobia of washing.
What?
Phobia of washing. So you have to do birkas hamazon. People are like lazy, like, I don't want to wash.
Like showering. I was like, no, showering is not.
No, like wash. So they have to bench. Like, I don't want to wash. I'll just eat this instead.
Right. So that's a good question, because that's interesting. That's very circumstantial. Like, if you want to eat bread, you should wash.
Right, but meaning Dafka avoid eating because he's saying I don't feel like doing the mitzvah of birkas hamazon because it takes a few minutes and I'm too lazy to do that right now. So whatever.
That's not bad. A few minutes is pretty good. Well, you're okay. So yeah. Amar of Tuvi Bar Kisnamar Shmuel. Okay, so he holds kli kufsa chayavin b'tzitzis. A kli kufsa is a garment that you keep in you keep it in your drawer. It's not so you keep it in your drawer. You mean you haven't worn it yet. It's something that you might wear one day. So since you might wear it one day, so Rashi said it's still called asher techaseba, that you're wearing it. You could wear it. As long as it's fitting to be worn, then you put on tzitzis. Now, Umod Shmuel Bezakin, Shmuel agrees that by an older person, Sha'asal L'chvodo Sheptura, you make tzitzis for his honor, meaning when he passes away, you bury him in the tzitzis, that garment is exempt from tzitzis. Why? My timer. He's wearing it, so you're covering the person with tzitzis. Asher techaseba amarachmana v'hayilav li'chsui avida. It has to be for wearing, and this person not wearing it, he's dead. So now that's the first opinion. Says the Gemara. Vahi shaita. At that moment, vadai raminalei. So now we argue. So it sounds like you're not, well, I don't know if we argue, but you're not really obligated because it's not something that you wear. At the same time, you should definitely put tzitzis on the garment when it's going on the person in the grave. Why? Misham loe lirash charafosei. That you don't want to laugh at the poor person. It's like you're making a mockery of him. You're putting a four-corner garment on him, and you're not putting tzitzis. So it's another way of saying, look, you can't fulfill mitzvahs. So that's the concept of why we tuck in our tzitzis when you go to a cemetery, because you don't want to be within 4 amos of a grave where it's like making a mockery of them. Now, what we do nowadays, we put tzitzis on the garment. There's different minhagim. Interesting. So he doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Right. So how does that fit our customs with this Gemara? It's interesting how we got there. But in Eretz Yisrael, I was trying to remember, but at funerals in Eretz Yisrael, so when they do the funeral, so they have just the body there on like some kind of stretcher covered in a talus. It's not not like here where it's in a casket. They're just on a. I don't remember if they put this on. I don't remember seeing it, but I was at funerals, so. Okay. Amar Rachel, Amar Rabbi Talis Shenikra Chutz LeShalosh Yitfor Toch Shalosh Lo Yitfor. So you have a garment that for and within or farther or within 3 finger breadths of the corner. So the first one is Chutz LeShalosh. If it's farther than 3 finger breadths, so then Yitfor, sew it up. Toch Shalosh Lo Yitfor. If it's within 3 finger breadths, so then don't sew it up. Now, why not? Because we had this earlier, we're worried that you're going to sew it up. And then what's going to happen? The threads are going to hang off. The threads that you're sewing are going to hang off. And now you're going to have 2 tzitzis. And then you're going to put 2 more. And then you have tzitzis. But the problem is you have to make it and it cannot be made. So you have to have a garment, a full garment. And on the garment, you put on 4 strings. So in this case, it's not a garment because it's torn 3 finger breadths. That's obligated in tzitzis. And therefore, when it's a garment now, you already have half the threads, and that's a problem of tasav lo min asui. Okay. Tanya nami hachi talis shenikra chutz shalosh yitfor, a garment that's formed within 3 finger breadths, away from the edge, away from the corner. So yitfor toch shalosh within 3. Rabbi Meir omer lo yitfor, like we just said. The chachamim omer yitfor. They said. You could do it, and we're not worried about those threads hanging off and putting on 2 more. So, Vishavin, but they both agree, both Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim will agree that Shelo Yavi Afilu Ama al Ama Mimakum Acher Ubat Techelas Betolaba. Don't go to another garment and take an Ama of that garment and put it on. And put it on this garment, meaning your garment's missing. It's a whole tear. The last 5 stitches are all torn. So go to another garment, take off an amma by an amma, and put on it, and then put it over here. Once again, you can't do that because you can't have a corner with the threads. You have to have a corner and then put the threads on the corner. To take from another garment that already has threads on it and sew it onto here is going to be invalid. The shovin, However, they agree maybe techeles mimakom acher v'tolen ba. And this is going to be interesting. Two opinions. Right now, you have tzitzis. Right now, you have a garment. Let's say you sew the garment together, and there's no strings. Now, the only strings you have are on your other tzitzis. And you like this one more. So you go and you untie the tzitzis from old garment. You tie it onto this garment. So right now, we're saying that's fine. That's okay. You can take the strands from another garment and put it on this garment. No problem. Okay. Turning the page. Bilvad shelo tehei mufsek. It's not clear exactly what this is teaching us, as long as all the threads are complete. So Tosa says exactly what are you teaching me? Yes, the threads can't be torn. So I think they give some kind of fancy explanation of what this line means. But yeah. So they can't be torn threads. It has to be full threads. Okay. And we learn from this brisa shma'as mina matirin mi beged lebeged. You're allowed to untie. Matir means to untie. So, by the way, very interesting. The word in Hebrew, in halakha, asur and mutter, allowed and not allowed, means tied and untied. That's what it means, right? Matir asurim, we say in the morning, means you free the people that are locked in. Meaning not people, your body's able to to move. So, but it's interesting that a person's supposed to feel when something's prohibited. They're tied down. They just can't do it. You're tied. You can't. Your hands are tied. I'm sorry. I can't eat at that restaurant. I'm sorry. My mouth can't swallow. I'm tied. I can't, So, and then mutter, when it's one, it means you're untied. Yeah. Okay. Says the Gemara, no, it's not a proof. Why? I'll tell you why it's not a proof. Because you made an assumption that the garments were the same quality. However, maybe the first garment was worn out. And Dilma the Ibloy, if it's worn out, so it's a sorry. If the first garment is worn out, so then you can take the tzitzis from that garment and put it here. Because it's not a disgrace to the mitzvah. It's not a bizayon to the mitzvah. But if it was a totally fine garment, so taking the tzitzis off from there and putting it on something else is disgracing it. And you're taking that off, that's called a bizayon. That's called a disgrace. Potentially. So two ways to learn. Either you're allowed to do it and we don't hold it a disgrace, or you say, no, it's not a proof because it's worn out. But if it wasn't worn out, it would be a disgrace. Got? Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So worn out doesn't just mean worn out, but Rashi says that it's not fitting for tzitzis anymore. It's I guess it's torn and it's already very it's maybe not a beggar that you wear anymore. It's worn out to the point of no return.
So what's the eitzah? Before we said that if it rips, right, you can't just re-sew it back up, or else because it's considered mina asui. It's considered that it's made instead of you making it. So what's the eitzah? You're supposed to untie
within 3 finger breaths.
Right. So let's say that the hole rips down so that it's like really close to the corner. So the eitzah is that you have to untie one of the tzitzis and then you sew it back up and then you put the tzitzis back on. Like we're saying you can't just sew it back.
I don't know, maybe you sew it nowadays in a sewing machine and therefore there's no threads hanging off. So
I thought it's talking about the where the hole is. If the hole starts to extend and it gets too close to the edge. Where it's
no, not the hole, just the garment. The garment rips within 3 finger breaths. And now we're worried that your threads that you're using to sew are going to hang off the edge. That was 2 opinions. Are we worried for that or not? So, okay, let's see. So, Tanarban Talis Shakul Techelas Kol Min Tzivanim Potrimba. It's interesting. A talis, a little bit what we had a few days ago. A talis that is totally blue color. Tekul Techelas. So then, Kol Min Tzivonin Potrimba Chutz Mi Kala Ilan. So any colors can exempt your mitzvah. I mean, any color strands on such a talis, because there is an obligation that the garment has to be the same color as the threads. It has to be the same color as the garment, but that only applied to a white garment, not a blue garment. A blue garment, you can put any colors you want, except for this fake blue, this color elam, this kind of indigo, which is similar to techeles, that you can't put on because that word you might end up telling this garment, and people are going to think that blue is really techeles, and then they're going to put on wool and linen on their garment. so you can't have this kala ilan. They're going to think it's the proper wool that is for tzitzis, but really it's not. It's kala ilan, not the chelas. So on this idea that you can't put on a kala ilan, the Gemara attacks. Meisvei talis ain't poter, but ella mina. A talis, you can only exempt it from its kind. I mean, it has to be the same as the garment. However, talis shekol techeles, maybe techeles, v'davar maybe techeles v'davar akar. I think you bring techeles and something else. V'tolaba. You can if it's a talis that's fully techeles, you can put techeles strands on it and something else and another color, and you put it on. However, the kala ilan lo yavi, but you can't put on this fake techeles color, this indigo color, being heavy kasher. But if you do it, it's good. So it sounds like, okay, you shouldn't do it, but if you do it, it's good. The other brisa sounds like you cannot put on kala ilan, and even if you do it, it's still not good. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lo kasha. It depends on how many threads you're putting through. Kan betalis bas arba chutin. When you only have one talis, the first brisa is talking about a talis that only has four strings. So there, 2 are white and 2 are kala ilan. That you cannot do because people are going to mistake it for techeles, and then there might be a problem of shatness. However, kan betalis bas shmona chutin. Here you're putting actually 8 strands. So you're putting 8 strings through. There we are not worried. We're not worried. In the you're putting 4 techeles strands, and then you're putting on 4 kala ilan. So since anyways, aside from the kala ilan, you have enough to fill your mitzvah, you have 4 strings already. So then that much we're not worried about. We're only worried about kala ilan, this indigo color, when that fulfills, you're trying to use that to fulfill your quota of 4 strings. When you already fulfilled your quota with techeles, so then we're not worried about the other 4 being mistaken for techeles. So, yeah. So, says the Gemara from here. Shma mina, from the fact that we, it's an interesting thing, from the fact that we invalidate your garment that you put kala ilan on. So shmasina matir and mi beged lebeged. So it sounds like I'm not 100% clear exactly what the proof is, but it sounds like from the fact that we invalidate it because of this worry that someone's going to take this kala ilan and mistaken it for techeles, sounds like you can untie the kala ilan and put on new tzitzis. That's the assumption. On that we say, oh, you see from there, you can untie from one garment and put on another garment. Meaning someone's going to take this kala ilan and they're going to put on their garment. You're going to sell this garment to somebody. They're going to untie the kala ilan and they're going to for their garment. Also, see that you can take from tzitzis from one garment and put it on the other garment, because our whole worry is that someone's going to that you're going to sell this and they're going to think that this is techeles, and they're going to need a thread of techeles from the garment they just bought from you. They're going to take one thread and put it on their garment. Because of that worry, we invalidated putting on kala ilan to fulfill your quota. But what do you see? That you're allowed to take from one garment and put on the other garment. Because if not, then we wouldn't be worried about it. So once again, the Gemara says, not necessarily dilma. So it says dilma di avad. We don't allow you to do it. It's just if you did it, it's not going to be invalid. So there's no proof that you're allowed to do it. The question is, if you did do it, is it valid or invalid? So once again, there's no ideally, you can go and just take strings off a garment and put on another garment. The question is, in a post-facto situation where you did it already, so now what? Is it invalid or not? So we say it's not invalid; it'll be valid, and we're worried about this kala ilan being confused for techeles. Okay, now this idea of taking from one garment to another garment has a potential issue of disgracing the mitzvah. Is a debate Rav and Shmuel. Itma Rav Amar ein matir beged lebeged, Shmuel Amar matir beged lebeged. Rav says you cannot take from one garment to another because it's disgracing that garment, and Shmuel says you can untie from one garment the threads and put on another one. Matir mi beged lebeged, even if it's not worn out. You have a bunch of pairs of tzitzis. You can take it from one and put on the other. No problemo. Rav Amar ein madlikin miner lener. Similarly, by Hanukkah, if you want to light one candle from another candle, is that called a disgrace also? Rav says, yes, you cannot do it. You can't take from one candle and use it to light another candle because the candle is being used for the mitzvah of Hanukkah. Now you're using it as fuel, so to speak, for the other candle. So that's a mundane use for a holy object. So that's called disgracing the mitzvah. Shmuel Amar madlikin min eliner. You could do it, no problem. One more. Rav Amar ein halakha krib. These are always put together. Matir and beged lebeged, madlikin min eliner, and Rav Amar ein halakha krib Shimon begreira, u'Shmuel Amar halakha krib Shimon begreira. Now we'll get back to greira in a second. That third case, but before the Amar Abaye kol milim avid Abaye was Rabbah. So he says everything Rabbah did was always like Rav. Abaye's teachers Rabbah always did like Rav. Kirav lebar mahanitlat. Aside from these three, these three cases of tzitzis, candle, and we'll see dragging the bench, there my teacher Rabbah, master, did like Shmuel. The halacha, lebar mahani tlat, Shmuel. These three always go together. These three he did like Shmuel. Everything he did like Rav. These three like Shmuel. Now, what's the case of dragging? Very, 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 very famous case in terms of Hilchos Shabbos. The Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Gur Adam Mitas Skiza V'Savsel B'Vachu Skavan Latzos Charetz. So literally, the words are: you can drag a bench, a chair, a bed, a chair, a bench, as long as you don't have kavanah, you don't have intent to make a hole in the ground. Making a hole in the ground is a prohibition on Shabbos. So now, this is what we call a davar she'eino miskavin. It's an act which you don't have intent for. Meaning, there's two things. Government always has to be. There's two things happening. You're dragging a bench. That's one act, and there's a second thing happening of a hole being made in the ground. Now, if it's inevitable, every time you open the fridge, the light goes on. Every time, so that's called a psik ratio. That's a cutting off a chicken's head, and you're not going to die. It's inevitable. That Rabbi Shimon says is for sure not allowed. But there's a number of cases that are in the middle. You're not sure. You do X, Y might happen, might not happen. It's not inevitable. So not every time you drag the bench is it going to make, obviously if it's a heavy bench, and it's not always going to make a charit. So the question is, can you do that? Can you not do that? So on that, Rabbi Shimon says, you're allowed to do it. Rabbi Yehuda argues on him. But Rabbi Shimon says you're allowed to do it. It's called davar she'eino miskavin, and that is mutter. So Shmuel held like Rabbi Shimon, and Abaye's Rabbi Rabbah held like Rav in every case, except for this case. These three cases, and there he held like Shmuel. So that's called the davar she'eino miskavin. It's a matter where you don't have intent, meaning you don't have intent for the forbidden act, but it's usually you're doing one thing, and you don't have intent for the second thing to happen. So that's called davar she'eino miskavin, and it's a big, big leniency for us. Yeah. So Rabbi Yehuda Maser le Ktara. So now, how exactly did they tie their tzitzis back then? So I think they're going to show us three examples. Rabbi Yehuda, this is how they did their laundry. So Rabbi Yehuda Maser le Ktara. Yehuda gave his talus over to the laundromat, and he wasn't worried that he wasn't worried that that guy in laundromat is going to take off at the cheles, use it for himself, and replace it with kala ilan. He wasn't worried about that. He trusted his local dry cleaner. Fine. Rav Chanina avid la sisa. Rav Chanina, when he would give his talus to the dry cleaner, he would fold it. He would fold it over so that the strings don't get detached. And Ravina chayet lehu mechat. So he would like somehow fold over the talus like into a corner, like I don't know, like maybe like a hamantash. I'm not sure exactly. And he would tuck all the strings inside, and then he would sew it up. So he would fold it up in a way, put all the strings inside, sew it up, and then give it to the dry cleaner.
I think there's like a little pocket on the corner of his tzitzis.
Yeah.
Like the actual beged, and it's like stick them in.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how many strands do we need to put on, and how many strands have to be hanging off? So, Tan Rabbanan, Kama Chutin, who knows saying how many strands you got to put on your baguette, on your garment. Beishamai Omer Arba, Beis Hillel Omer Shlosha. You put 4. Beis Shammai says, and Beis Hillel says you put on 3. Into that hole, you have a hole on your garment. So Beis Shammai says you put in 4. Beis Hillel says you put through 3 strings. The Kama Tehei Mishulash. And how long should it go down? Aside from the braided part, how long should it go down? How long should the actual tzitzis be? So Beis Shammai Omrim Arba should be 4 finger breadths. We'll see more about that. Beis Hillel Omrim Shlosha, it should be 3 finger breadths. Now, the Shalosh Beis Hillel Omrim Achas Me Arba Be Tefach Shel Kol Adam. This that Beis Hillel said 3, it means 3, which is 1/4 of a tefach of each person, meaning the tefach is either measured as 4 thumbs, 6 pinkies, or 5 index finger widths. So when he said 4, it meant 4 thumb widths. So yeah. Amar of Papa, tefach deraisa, here we go, arba begodel, 4 for your 4 thumb widths, shis biktana, 6 pinky widths, and chamesh betilta, and 5 of your
middle
the third finger, but
yeah, the middle finger.
No, I think it means the index finger.
The third finger on the hand, which should be the middle finger.
The tilta etzba. It's not like your tilta etzba. The third meaning sounds like after your pinky, the ring in the middle. Then, yeah, somehow it means. I believe it means the index finger. You know, it says the third one, but it sounds like the third one, which is your index finger. So, yeah. So now. Okay, so 1 second. Sorry, lost place. Yeah, Amar Rav Huna. So arba betoch arba, umishulashos arba. So Rav Huna says you put 4 strings in that are 4 strings, down finger breaths. Rav Yehuda Amar shlosha betoch. Put 3 strings through, which are 3. Meaning you don't fold it over. Mishulasho shlosha, and they hang down 3. Okay. Amar of Papa hilchasa arba. You put 4 strands through. Betoch shalosh, within. Sorry, the betoch here means within 3 finger breadths of the corner. Meaning it has to be within 3 finger breadths of the corner. That's called a That's called the picture. Yeah. Within 3 finger breadths of the corner. So here's the corner. So we'll see that it's measured by to the end of your fingernail. So from the corner of your garment, it's going to be 3. That's how you measure. You measure 3 finger breadths from the corner of the garment. Okay, so it has to be, once again, Rapapa Hilchas Arba, 4 strings, Betoch Shalosh, within 3 finger breadths of the end of the garment, Mishuloshos Arba, and they hang down 4 finger breadths. Now,
what does that mean? The hanging down. What does that mean? After the knots are over?
The threads. How long do the threads have to go after it's braided at least once?
Oh, before the first knot
have to go?
starts, you're saying.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the Memra, this like Shura. Yeah, simply. Well, in our tzitzis we have 5 knots, and then we have hanging down. Minimal has to be a knot, and then hanging down at least 4 finger breadths after the knot. So Lememra includes Shiura. What you tell me that there's a specific measurement? Viraminu tzitzis ain't tzitzis. So it says tzitzis ain tzitzis ella yotze, the ain tzitzis ella mashu. That tzitzis just means something which is protruding, and even if it's protruding, it's coming out of your beged, out of your garment, even a little bit, even a mashu. That's still enough to fill your requirement. So what are you telling me? You have to have all these finger breadths hanging down? It's not true. Even a little bit is fine. The Kfar Oluz, Yochanan ben Beseira. So Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, they had a board meeting. Where was the board meeting? In the attic of Beseira. Secret board meeting. No Zoom invites, nothing. Executive board meeting. Yeah. So they kicked the rabbi out of this one too. So Va'amru, now this time the rabbis joined and kicked everyone else out. That's the way it should be. No. Va'amru tzitzis ein lashir. And it says tzitzis has no measurement. There's no limit. No minimal, no maximum. Kiyotze ba lulav ein lashir. So to a lulav, no measurement. Says the Gemara, what? My love ein lashir. You think it means there's no measurement at all? Minimal, maximum, and nothing? No, can't be. What it means is, next page, ein lashir lamala. Rather, aval yesh lashir lamate. There's no maximum, but there's definitely a minimum. For tzitzis, there's a minimum, like we just said. There's a minimum. The ilo temahachi. If you don't say that, there's actually no minimum. So then, chayotze balulav ein lashir. So hachanami ein lashir klal. When you said that there's no measurement, if you don't say it means there's no maximum, but it means that there's no minimum, and then it said similarly a lulav has no minimum either. So b'hatnan, how could that be? Lulav sheish posh losh tachim k'dei l'na'neabo kosher. Clear that a lulav has to have 3 tefachim on the lulav. That when you shake it, it can make it could shake a little bit. So a lulav for sure has a minimal measurement. So too by us we also have a minimal measurement. Ella must be ein lo shir l'mala v'yesh lo shir l'mata. There's no maximum, but there's definitely a minimum. I believe in halacha though it doesn't work this way. I think in halacha your tzitzis do have a maximum. I think it's double the amount of your. I think that when you take your threads and you see how long it is compared to your knots, it's 1 and then 2. That makes sense though.
I think this is Illinois.
I'll double check. Yeah, but I think extra long is not supposed to be extra long. I one time walked in with tzitzis that were extra long, and the 75-year-old Rosh Kollel walked over to me and says, "I have to cut them; they're too short." But he says, "Don't cut them with metal, so I'll give you scissors." So already you can burn them with a match. So that's why I learned that they have to be a certain measurement. So yeah. So Taner Rabbanan tzitzis ain't tzitzis ela anaf. So the word tzitzis doesn't mean protruding. It means in anaf is like on hanging, right? V'cheinu Omar vayikeni b'tzitzis roshi. It says in Yechezkel, you took from tzitzis of my head. So I don't know how to translate it exactly. They took from a lock of hair, a lock of tzitzis from my hair. So meaning the way they did it was they had like this big braid, and after the braid on their head, they would have the hairs hanging off. So too here, there's like a braid, like we have our braid, and then we have the tzitzis hanging off. So the Amar Abaye b'tzarich ki tzutisa daramai. So you have to make your tzitzis like the Arameans did it, meaning you have to have don't think you could have the thread and then the braid at the end. You have to have a braid first and then the threads afterwards, like we have it. The same way their hair is braided and then there's threads coming afterward. So too, when we have to do a braid, the braid has to be first and then the thread is hanging off and not the other way around. Taner Rabbanan hital ala karen al agdil shera. If you put tzitzis on the karen, on the karen is like the point corner, the corner of the garment. O al hagdil. So gdil is you had this. There's 2 explanations. You had this like very thick that you put this very thick thread on your garment so that it shouldn't rip, or it's I don't know what the other explanation is, or it's like thick threads you put on that the garment shouldn't rip. So if you put it on there, that's also okay. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov posel b'shtein. He says putting it on the corner on this gdil thick area is going to be invalid. So now, kiman az lahadam Rav Gidal Marav tzitzis tzricha shteino tefes al the tzitzis. So who does the following statement go? That the tzitzis has to actually go no tefes ala karen, has to hang over the edge, the very corner of your tzitzis. Shenamar al kanfe big dance on the corner of your garment. Kiman Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, like we had earlier. So it can't be. He said it's invalid if you put it on the exact corner. It has to be hanging on the corner, but the actual string has to be attached not on the corner. it has to be hanging on the corner. It is this picture over here. Your garment, it comes off, you put it here, over here, and it hangs on, touches the corner. So it goes off horizontally off the garment, and then when it goes down, then it's going to be like this. So that's how the best way to do it is you put it horizontally and then it hangs down, but not to put it we don't put it like diagonally like that. That's how the non-Jews did it. Okay. So it's getting late. Always getting late. So every day at 6:57 it gets late. I don't know how. So okay. Okay, I guess we'll stop here.
Thank you.